I just screwed this up. Hang on, let's start over. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. Welcome to Reading Between the Lines. I'm joined today by Krysta Maravilla, and she is an incredible author, wanderer, coach, creator, and perpetual optimist, which is something that I want to talk to her a little bit more about. And she writes the Of Fire and Shadow series, and included in that series is Spark and Spared. And when she isn't squirreled away writing and reading or eating Nutella, she can be found plotting her next adventure as she really loves to explore. With a passion for hiking and a desire to experience different cultures, she has lived in various places across the US and the world. So welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Tell me more about that, because I want to just lean into the optimist and the wanderer and what that means for you.
Okay, so I feel as though I think when we are all right, sorry, I'm awkward. But the it drives me moving forward with everything that I do. And wandering is something that's almost embedded in my soul. I don't know how else to explain it. I get this like restless feeling that, oof, there's another place I need to be. And I don't necessarily know where that place is. So
Yeah.
when I was working in the US, I'm currently back in the US, but I worked at a job that allowed me to do remote work. So I was able to pick up and move about quite frequently. So I would do that like 3 months somewhere or maybe 6 months somewhere, or a little less because I want to maintain my residency in my current state. And so I would just kind of explore these different locations, and on the so hit as many national parks as possible. So
Oh, I love that.
the national parks have been quite a bit of inspiration for me in general. And this all started back in 2015, 16, when I quit a whole bunch of jobs. I sold my house. Well, I rented my house. I pretty much gave away or sold whatever was in my house, downsized to like my car, and then took off across the US with one of my good friends. She was with me for about a month with her 4-month-old, 3-year-old, and her like brand new au pair. And we hit,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's a brave girl. And we hit so many national parks. That whole trip was like between 9 to 10 months. And it like awoke something in me that I cannot
I love that.
fully articulate, or and like it helped me unravel so many things. So wandering to me helps me, like it's kind of like this revisitation of just this freedom that I get, this playful exploration, this untethered but yet fully in my body experience.
I love that. So I think I've mentioned to you, I live right next to Yosemite National Park. Did I tell you that?
No, which
So
one?
so I live right near Yosemite National Park. I'm toward the North Gate here
Okay.
in Northern California. So we do a lot of exploring and hiking when we can, and it's just beautiful. So being able to live in a place like that, I can relate to what you're saying. It really does make you feel really connected to, the land and the sense of place here. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about Spark, and the beautiful book cover is behind you. So in your series of Fire and Shadow, you've got Spark as like book one, but then Spared is kind of like a prequel, a little novella, right?
Right.
Okay, and
It's
I'm looking.
best read after Spark, so
Okay,
that you understand the characters a little bit, and there's like you'll get a little bit more of the undertone to it.
yes,
Uh, that's the hope, and then it's going to tie into again book two, so it will be more fresh on your mind as
love
we
it.
move on. Mm-hmm.
So with Spark, and for anyone listening, Spark has a really strong female lead who lives a very double life. So tell us a little bit more about her and then more about the premise of Spark.
So Fee is a really dynamic character. By dynamic, I mean she'd rather grunt at you than have a conversation if she could get away with it.
Yeah.
Or like she's got an aversion to touch and like a really heavy history. So and a lot of that she remembers, but then there's parts of her history she doesn't remember. And so Fee but that's like Fee's hard side. And then dynamically on the other side, when she's with her best friend, she's more of her traumatized, younger version, which
Mm-hmm.
you get a more of a feel for in Spared, because she's agreed to go undercover as Lady Orphine. And so you'll see more of this, like, this doesn't fit. She wants to be, if she could be in her other role, she'd much more free and to
Right.
but she has to balance, which means she's being triggered a lot.
I
Go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think with your background working in mental health as well, I feel like Fee's character was really well developed in that she's just so relatable. Whether that's she's expressing behaviors that I have myself, or I have friends. Like I have some friends who are just like, "Don't touch me. We don't hug." I know this person particularly, we're friends and she loves me, but she's not touchy-feely. And so it was interesting to also see that, like with Fee's character. And the trauma that she has experienced as a child and just how that plays out, like with the reoccurring nightmares, things like that, was just I just thought it was so well done. So
um, Mental health for me, I think a lot of stories often can glide over mental health in the fantasy world.
yeah.
I'm not trying to stereotype and just, I might be wrong, but it's one of my hopes is to create a character, which is Fee, or to have created one that embodies so much dynamic issues, if you will,
Hmm.
complexity. And as she travels through her series, it'll be harder for me to write, to be honest, as she has to arc through and decide to make some changes.
Yeah.
If you like, I think if you see her change, and you see the places where she has to say that's going to be a later thing, um, and I really want to be able to throw in a little seeds of like you could be, having a really bad moment and your life could really be sucking, which hers does a lot.
Yes.
And because she's got a really solid why, now that why is not necessarily a healthy why, but
Mm,
because she's got a really solid why in Spark, she stops those thoughts and she gets back up and she's like, that's just like how, like, it's not going to help me if I go down these roads. So I want to like embed these thoughts, these
absolutely.
tools.
So for people listening, Spark is definitely it's a fantasy novel. There's magic, there's like political intrigue, things like that. Um, and Fee, especially, she's been taught that magic doesn't exist. And then
Mhm.
she does have some suppressed magic that comes to light. And she also has a lot of trust issues with friendships that she has had created. Those are tested, and she's kind of adapting and pivoting. So, in that this is a fantasy novel, the point I'm trying to make is that I do read fantasy, but I don't know that I understand fantasy to the extent of like there are kind of like subgenres. Would you
Mhm.
call this high fantasy, or how would you classify
I
this?
would.
Okay.
High fantasy for sure.
Okay.
Epic as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then with these characters that you have created, some of them have a very strong following with a lot of the reviews that you have. I've noticed that other people love them as much as I do. When you are developing a character, how does that start? Is it just divine inspiration that kind of hits you and this voice is talking to you, or do you feel like the story has a need for a specific character and then you create that role?
So I started off as a pantser with that for those that might not know what that term means, it means I sat down and I was writing by the seat of my pants. And so when I was like, all right, it's time for me to start writing a book. I plan on writing a book on an alien abduction series later.
I was totally going to ask you about other genres, so I'm so glad you said that. But okay, keep going.
Well, I'll drop in that this whole creativeness started right before I took that wandering trip in nice, because I had a dream in 2015 that felt so real that I was abducted by aliens, and I was taken someplace that was it was like finding home. I don't know how else to explain it. And I was not scared. I was not upset. I was like, my dream ended with me flying a single, like a little aircraft. I just dropped off my mom. I was a only child with a single mom. So I picked her up, made sure she knew I was okay. And then we had dinner with my friends and family on the alien big spaceship, the motherboard, if you will. And then I dropped her off. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is awesome. I'm flying my plane. I mean, my airship, and going back. And I did not want to wake up. But that
I love
dream
that.
will a learning ground and it has been, because I've rewritten it 5 times. So when I sat down to write Spark, I literally just had 3 different starts, and the prologue that you read and chapter 1, I think, were the 2 that maintained consistency throughout.
Okay.
And those just came. And then because I wrote it so many times, the characters evolved as my writing got stronger. The first draft was, let's just be real, pretty horrible. And I don't really want, well, I mean, I will share it with people if they really want to read the horribleness, but it's like like I would say on version 3.
Stop blinking.
And they did that because I don't know, they did it in their own unique way as the writing flow kind of pulled together.
Yeah. I love that.
So.
That makes a lot of sense too. And then also, I have to talk about the cover. If you're listening to this, you can't see it, but you should look it up. But the
I can
cover
show you.
is, yeah, if you hold it up to the camera for those watching, that is just, it is stunning. And I was going to ask if, how much of you, how much of you designed this, or did you have an artist helping you? Like, how did you put together this beautiful cover?
So I hired a wonderful book designer. Her name's Nat. Input in this particular cover, and then moving on in the series. I've got the entire book covers done at this point.
Love it.
Yeah. And so it was, I had to, like, my friend Kelly, who was my writing coach at the time and helped me through version 2. And I sat down after looking at the covers that I was presented with, and we decided, like, together, Kelly is just amazing. I really want to give Kelly a lot of credit here because she helps. She's just amazing. She suggested that we have her turning, because that's the whole point. We have her kind of like, because I'm very much into symbology.
Yes.
And we can talk. Awoken a little bit, or like, hey, and she's got this gift that she doesn't want to accept, and she's got a life that she's comfortable with but not happy in, and then something happens that she's all of a sudden changed, and she's really not okay with it. And book 2, the Sunders cover, has her turning a little bit more, so this is where she's like starting to like grapple a little bit more. Sunder means she's really going to be torn apart to be re-put together, is what I'm planning on doing. And then Soar is when she actually is together, and we're getting those pieces of her that are like, all right, I'm not going to do these things, or whatever you might will with her character. It's hard to explain when you don't know the characters fully, and I don't want to give it all away.
We want everyone to read it, so
yeah. story that she embodies her power as she is in all of her pieces to do what she must with wrapping up the story, because there's a lot of pieces going on in the story too.
So this will be basically a three-parter plus the prequel, so a total of 4 books.
Actually, it's going to be 5, because I have so this is, I consider this a novella, and I have, which I know this is weird, it's before the story, but I actually have a prequel as well, which will because I insinuate a forest incident.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it goes into the forest incident, and her experience kind of there.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And then, so what you're saying is the final cover for the last book in the series, she's like fully facing you. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I love it. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know I said this, I wanted to ask you about world building, because I feel like you've done this very, very well. And so, I mean, how would you describe just world building in general for people who are not necessarily like that into fantasy? And then how would you describe your process of creating these worlds?
Okay. So first, I want to share that world building for me, I incorporate, I learned a lot from this guy named David. His name and Farland, and he's a Sense Path. So David Farland.
Okay.
And world building for me means that I am going to try to include all of the senses into a space, and just my mind goes, I guess, a little bit more broadly when I'm creating these fantasy spots. So like I'm trying to make it Sacred Woods, for example, reminds me a lot of the Redwoods. And there was a space that I had in the Redwoods that I would just love to go back to, but it was ethereal and it was just so warm and welcoming and like settling. Of course, it didn't have that grand treehouse or, the lights that may or that she's not entirely sure where they're coming from, or so it's, I think she actually knows. I think they're flowers. But there's the world building itself. When I sit down to write something, what I try to do is I incorporate everything somehow within that book, and or that chapter. So like you'll see that you'll see that she's got a scent. You'll see that we've got distinct like noises at times. You'll see like the touch. I'll include that. In some points, I'll even in Spared, there's a scene in the beginning where she focuses on this rickety table because it's rickety and it becomes a metaphor, right, for her as she's like going through this bad scene, and she's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm committed to doing it, and it's not a good idea. It's not going to be a good for me to describe it. I incorporate all of the senses as I create. I will look for inspiration if I'm hitting a scene that I'm like, what will that look like?
Okay.
So sometimes like if I don't know how to describe a castle, like I think there's House Neared, and I'm probably saying my pronunciation is horrible. I make up all of these things that don't make, but House Neared, which that house is made of like water. It's made by water nymphs. And so there's water on every level in some form, as well as like a fountain in the middle. And so like figuring out what kind of a house I wanted it to look like, or the fountain, or like this, I had to look for inspiration to be like, well, how can I even describe that? And then that took refining to describe it well, because the first round might not have done that. And I might know what I mean, but a normal reader might not at all. Track with my brain.
And with that coming into play, like how much of, because you have beta readers or ARC readers, perhaps, maybe not ARC readers, but
no, they're right. You're right. ARC readers and beta readers, both.
And with the beta readers, like how much of their input does that help develop the story? Like,
so I didn't have I'm an independently published author, and I didn't have any beta readers read my book because I'm just so new. I don't have a following yet. I'm welcome too,
Yet.
so come on over. But
Come on over, check her out on Instagram. I'll post that in the show notes.
yes, or so what I did, I had a lot of editors go through my book. I spent a lot of money on editors, and because I
Okay.
rewrote it, so like I knew there was something wrong with it.
Hmm.
I when I was writing, I couldn't, as a new writer, I didn't know what it was. So when I went through all those rewrites, I had an editor read through and give me feedback on all of those levels,
Okay.
and they were instrumental with helping me. It's cheaper, 100%
Yeah.
cheaper to get beta readers, but my editors helped me refine my writing and my story in a way that a beta reader would never have been able to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they were gentle about their feedback. Like,
Yeah.
my first Parissa, my consistent editor, she was the only one that read my first draft of this book. And she came back like, oh, it's a nice try. You know, you got a lot of things going on. And you could find a beta reader that could be like, this is horrible. And then that crushes your creative soul and
Yeah,
wounds you.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so I just say, like, when you share and you're vulnerable on a project like this, to just be careful. Careful.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me ask you about work that inspires you. What are there other authors that you really, I don't want to say idolize, but like who are your absolute favorites or that you wish you could write like?
Mm, so I haven't read her in a long time. And I'll share why. When I started writing in fantasy, I
Mhm.
realized that I was a sucky writer. And so I had to stop reading fantasy books, period, because I would compare myself. And then I stopped reading fantasy. But I can say at the time, like, Sarah J. Maas really impressed me, if I'm
Sure.
saying her right. I did read I think it's called The Chosen One, or The Chosen Chronicles, by like K.F. Brine, and I like
Mhm.
that series, just that series of hers. Um, there's Lee Barrow. Am I saying her name right?
Lee Bardugo. I'm looking Bardugo.
Bardu-
I have her book over there. I'm looking at it, but
yeah. Like, she's
I know
got,
who you're
I think
talking about.
she's got several series, I think, out there,
Very,
and
yes.
I read all of them. And
Yeah.
there's more. I
She's
just
one of my
in the
favorites too.
she's such a good writer. So such a bad writer. So, it's been, as I said, years. I want to say 5 years, because every year, or 6 years at this point, because every year that I just couldn't. I couldn't. My creative was not ready.
It's a little bit like imposter syndrome as well, because then you kind of measure yourself to these people who are published and are having a huge, incredible following, and then you really feel like you could never compete. So, um,
Yeah.
I can relate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I would I would agree though that your writing style, as well as like Lee, or who else did we just say? Sarah, I don't know what if it's Mass or Moss, but Sarah J. Moss. Um, all three of you are incredible at creating a sense of place, and that world building is very well done. So that's why I really especially wanted to like lean in to ask you about that, because for me what really gets me hooked on a fantasy novel is being able to really feel all the things, to smell it, to feel it, to taste it, to hear the sounds, and really to feel like I'm there. So you do that incredibly well. And I look forward to seeing like how the rest of the series um, progresses as well. And I know that as a writer, you will just continue to flourish as everybody does when, you know, one project after another. I was going to ask about books that you are maybe on the back burner, like things you want to do? You had mentioned like the alien abduction one.
Yeah.
I'm a big sci-fi fan, so I'm loving that. So, but yeah, what other projects do you have kind of like perhaps in the pipeline?
I have thought, so I've read a lot of like paranormal romance. I needed something that was not in
Yeah.
the world. Um, and it's a paranormal romance series called The Blood Mountain Pack, or the Blood Mountains. I haven't named it. And kind of go through some couples that have some challenging times. But that's like a light read because I think the like spark is so dynamic. It takes a lot of energy for me to pull together, and I um so like I'm constantly worried that I'm like when I do something that I think should be mentally like oriented towards a tool or to like mental health or to like a PTSD symptom, that I'm putting the right pieces together to give you guys the right sense as well as the right tools to, if you are going to use like some feedback from the book, to like be able to pull out and say, oh, well, Fee did this, I can do this, while also having it real.
Okay.
So the paranormal, I feel like just be a lighter right than
Mm-hmm.
the heavier like what Fee's going through.
Got it. Yeah, I think also being able to play with different genres as well. I mean, like Bardujo, we'll figure out how to say her name. She also plays with that because she has that newer series that's about like a character who sees spirits and like ends up there's some demonology. She's got the fantasy things. She does a whole kinds of different things. Well, I want to ask you a couple just more questions before I let you go. Um, I know that you, as you said, you label yourself as a wanderer. We talked a little bit about your love for exploration, but what about the optimism part? Because you call yourself an optimist.
Yes, and I think how it is like super important to always constantly keep the light kind of dead center in where you're going, or like your North Star. And by doing that in a positive way, that's where the light comes in. It helps navigate and or helps me navigate all of the other things. And it's when if somebody is struggling out there for their optimism or their even purpose, like when
Yeah.
you kind of sit down into like your being, I think purpose is a word that is is deceiving for us because we're just we're here now, which means we're serving a purpose here now, right? um Having this conversation and like we'll just use us right now, having this conversation. um our purpose is about kind of making sure we're present in the now and following the trails of joy that light us up, um, while navigating the negative, heavier experiences that life will always bring with it. So by being a perpetual optimist, I am always constantly focused on the North Star, which for me feels like my joy. Writing, exploring, kind of this sense of freedom. Um, because if I were to focus on anything else, it could, like Fee, derail me from where I really want to be, where what I really
Absolutely.
want to be looking at.
Yeah.
Um, so
I love that. That's beautiful.
hmm.
um, Now, also beyond being an author, you also work as a coach as well. Share with us a little bit how people can learn more about you and learn about what you do as well.
So my background is in mental health counseling, and I'm my coaching you can find on my website. It's premium coaching, so it's a monthly package, and
Hmm.
what I do is work with people individually on their mindset and their and hoping to shift those mindsets, or not hoping, but actively shifting those mindsets, because that's what you'd be entering into the
Yeah.
relationship with the intention of doing. And moving somebody from a space of, let's say, frustration or stagnation, um, or just, hey, I've got lightness, you feel like you resonate, I want to go higher.
Yeah.
And then help you get higher by holding you accountable, by weekly meetings, um by working and figuring out, what are those blocks, where are you.
Yeah. I think so many people really need that.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Krysta, thank you so much. This was so wonderful to have you. I will link to all of the books and to your website as well. And then on Instagram, is there anywhere else that people should connect with you, or did we hit all the points?
I think I'm across all the platforms, like Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram, Twitter. Like, you don't have to put all of those down, but all my username is the same, so my handle is the same. Krysta Maravilla. Um, do you mind me sharing what Maravilla means and
Please,
why?
because I butchered that, and I'm glad that you pronounced it properly for me. So
Okay.
please go ahead. Yeah.
So, for those who may not know what Maravilla means, Maravilla is a Spanish word or name. It was my grandmother's name, and it was
Mm,
given to me into English as marvelous or wonder or awe.
yeah.
And for the longest time, the reason why I took it as my pen name, because it's part of my names, but just not my whole name, is I used to reject my marvelousness. And I
Mm,
think, there are moments where I still do, to be honest and authentic.
yeah.
It's about the journey. And so my goal is to help people kind of sit into the marvel of who they are, and just help them navigate. And I'm using navigate a lot, but see the landscape of their being
Yeah.
as nothing broken um, or lacking, but something filled with wonder and awe and miracles, really, because,
Mm,
like, you're here now, right?
yeah.
Like, there's
I
nothing
love that.
innately wrong with you. So anyway,
No.
um,
Ah, I love
Krysta
that.
Maravilla.
So good. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And it was an absolute pleasure. And then keep me posted when the next book is out. And I also need to go read Spared now. So
Okay,
thank
well,
you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.